The sun had barely risen over the Arizona territory in 1879 when the cowboy brushed away the last layer of sand from the stone ledge. His breath caught the moment he saw it, a bright, unmistakable shimmer of gold hidden beneath the desert crust. For a heartbeat, the world around him went silent. No wind, no birds, no memory of the long, hungry months he'd spent drifting from ranch to ranch. Only the raw, dazzling promise of fortune. His fingers grazed the vein, and he felt the cold truth of it. This was enough wealth to change a man's whole bloodline. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to look around. That's when he saw the carvings, spirals, symbols, and animal shapes etched into the Red Canyon wall with careful hands. Apache hands. The kind that marked a place as sacred long before the first white rancher ever crossed these deserts. The cowboy stepped back, suddenly aware he had crossed into ground that wasn't just claimed, it was honored. A quiet unease crept through his chest as he imagined what the tribe would see in him, another intruder. Another thief chasing gold instead of respect. His horse stamped nervously behind him. Sensing the strange tension that hung in the air, the cowboy stood there for a long moment, torn between the life he could build from this strike and the man he had promised himself he'd become. He had seen what greed did to people, how it twisted neighbors into rivals and turned good men into scavengers. He had watched miners burn entire valleys for nuggets smaller than a thumbnail. He had sworn he wouldn't live that way. Yet this gold glittered like temptation itself, whispering of easy answers to every hardship he'd ever known. Finally, he inhaled sharply and reached for his hat, pressing it against his chest. As if offering a wordless apology, he brushed sand and broken stone back over the exposed vein until the last glint of gold vanished beneath the earth. "Some things ain't mine to touch," he murmured into the quiet morning. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. Not from regret, from the weight of choosing honor over hunger. He mounted his horse slowly, giving the canyon one last respectful glance before turning away. He didn't take a map, didn't make a mark, didn't look back. By the time he rode out of the canyon, the light had shifted across the sky, painting the rocks with a soft copper glow. The cowboy felt the familiar ache of loss tugging at his ribs, but beneath it was something steadier, the calm that followed a righteous choice. He knew he would leave that gold behind forever. And though he could never predict it, 13 years later, the people whose land he protected would return that choice in a way no gold vein could ever match. The cowboy froze as the Apache riders drew closer, their silhouettes wavering in the afternoon heat. 13 years had passed since he walked away from the gold buried beneath their ancestral sandstone, yet the memory had never left him. He had grown older, his hair touched with gray, his ranch weathered by time and loneliness. As the riders stopped before him, dust swirled around their horses' hooves, carrying an old, familiar tension. But there was no anger in their eyes, only a weight he didn't yet understand. He stepped forward cautiously, unsure why they had come after all these years. The eldest rider dismounted, a man with deep-set eyes and braids streaked with silver. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a heavy leather pouch, placing it gently at the cowboy's boots. The gesture alone sent a ripple of confusion through the cowboy's chest. He bent slowly, lifting the pouch. Inside lay nuggets of gold, far more than he had ever uncovered that day in 1879. His throat tightened. "I don't understand," he murmured. The elder nodded. "For the gold you left untouched," he said quietly. "You honored our sacred ground. We remember such things." The cowboy felt the weight of the moment settle over him more heavily than the gold itself. 13 years ago, he had buried his own greed beneath the desert sand and walked away with nothing but a lesson. He never imagined that anyone had seen him do it. But as he looked into the elder's eyes, he realized the truth. The tribe had been watching. They knew the land, the cliffs, the carvings. They knew every stranger who trespassed. They had seen his choice. And for them, the choice mattered more than the treasure ever could. The elder extended his hand, not for repayment, but for acknowledgement. The cowboy shook it with quiet respect. Around them, the other riders remained solemn, their expressions carrying the weight of tribal history and ancestral memory. "Honor circles back," the elder said again. You left what was not yours. Now we return what is? The cowboy felt emotion rise in his chest, a mixture of humility, gratitude, and disbelief. He had given up wealth for conscience. And yet somehow, in the long stretch of years, the desert had found a way to return the gesture with interest. As the Apache riders prepared to leave, the cowboy stopped them. "Why now?" he asked. The elder smiled softly. "Because time reveals a man's truth. We waited to see if your life stayed clean, if your hands stayed empty of what was not yours. And they did?" With a final nod, the riders turned and disappeared into the desert haze. The cowboy stood alone again, the leather pouch still warm in his palm. But this time, the loneliness felt different, lighter. He looked toward the horizon, understanding that the desert had given him something far greater than gold. The knowledge that his integrity had been seen, remembered, and honored. And that was a wealth no one could ever measure.